With more than 10,000 analysts, traders, investors, producers and miners descending on London this week for LME Week 2013, it provided an excellent opportunity for us here at the FT to gauge the opinion in the metals market about the global economy, which metals might perform well next year. And here to discuss some of the things that we picked up this week, some of the key themes, is Jack Farchy, commodities correspondent here at the Financial Times. So Jack, can we just start by discussing what we learnt really about the global economy this week? Probably start with China, given it's been the sort of main driver of metals for the last decade or so. Are people still bullish on China?
Well, it was very interesting. The metals traders and the smelters and miners who came to London this week, the message that I heard time after time again was, what are you all worried about? China's absolutely fine. The financial community's got it completely wrong. They think that China's slowing down and there's some kind of crisis there. What we're seeing is, yes, maybe the growth has slowed a little bit, but it's still very strong. So, for example, Thomas Keller, the chief executive of Codelco, the world's largest copper miner, told us they see Chinese growth at 7 to 8%. Chinese copper demand is also growing at 7 to 8%. A lot of the physical traders are coming back from China and saying, you know, we're selling all the copper we can there.
Okay, so there's a disconnect then between the sort of investment banking community's views on China and what the producers are telling us. If we move away from China, we were picking up some signs that people are getting a little bit more positive on Europe. Not to say things are fantastic, but perhaps they've bottomed out and there are some signs of, you know, growth coming back.
Yeah, certainly true. I was talking to an aluminium trader who was telling me, you know, every year in the last 4 years, there's been some sector of our demand side customer base who we've been worried about they're just going to go out of business. And now, nothing's great, nothing's looking great, but we're not terrified anymore. We think we've hit the bottom.
Okay, well, perhaps we then should move on to some of the metals, really, and just discuss some of the views. Copper has been everybody's favourite metal for as many years as I can remember now. But we did pick up this week some signs that people were just turning a little bit more bearish on it. I mean, there seems to be a consensus that we're heading for a surplus next year. I mean, personally, it doesn't look to me as if it's going to be a big one. Is that, do you think it'll be a big surplus?
Certainly right. It's interesting, even from a few months ago, I was at CESCO Week, which is the big gathering of the copper industry in Chile, and people were talking about a pretty big surplus for 2014, and already they're still talking about a surplus, they're still talking about more supply than demand, but already the numbers are coming down. And, you know, for example, we had Codelco talking about a surplus, we had Minmetals also talking about a surplus, but they're not talking about big numbers, maybe 300,000 tonnes in a market where demand is over 20 million tonnes. So while the broad consensus is, yes, copper supply will outstrip demand next year, everyone's a bit worried about saying prices are going to collapse, because we can't quite be sure that all of that supply is going to come right on time, and if it doesn't, well, the global economy looks about okay, so prices could stay pretty firm.
Right, well, let's just rattle through some of the other metals then. I mean, one metal that nobody's positive on still is aluminium. Obviously a big overhang in the market. I didn't really pick up many signs that anyone was particularly bullish on
what
aluminium.
What did you think the most bullish metal of the week was?
It seemed to be zinc, actually. Well, zinc and tin, but I'm not sure we can count tin because it's such a small market and you can't really deal in any size. But zinc certainly seemed to have quite a following this week.
I also heard, amazingly for some people, some bullish views on nickel. Beginning to think that maybe it's a supply ban that the Indonesian government has been talking about, yes, restricting exports. Indonesia, one of the big suppliers of low-grade ferronickel, which has been key to an increase in Chinese production in the last few years, that might begin to have a big impact on the market. In addition, we're seeing some closures outside of China. For example, Glencore, I think last week, announced they were closing a mine in Dominican Republic. So some people beginning to look at nickel, although there are certainly a lot of skeptics out there still.
Finally, I guess we should address the elephant in the room, so to speak, at LME Week, warehousing and the long queues at some of the warehouses of the LME and the proposals to deal with that. And this week we heard from the new boss of the LME, Gary Jones, and his thinking on the overhaul and the new rules that they could put in place later this month.
He wouldn't say very much about it, but he did give the impression that something like the initial proposal that they set out in July, they're going to go ahead with. He said it's not going to be anything completely left field of that. But he did say they're thinking about making changes. He wouldn't tell us exactly what. He hinted that this 100-day queue that they've put in could be reduced. He described that as a stalking horse to see what people thought, which sounds like it might not be the final version. Now, again, this is a kind of technical debate for traders, but it has a big impact on the market, particularly the aluminium market, where these queues have had quite a big impact on prices and premiums.
Thanks, Jack. It's been an interesting and pretty exhausting week, actually. Well, cocktail parties and dinners, but we have survived. We're still here. For more commodities coverage from the Financial Times, go to ft.com/commodities.